بخبركم تقاطلتي ساتلايت تلفزيون الرسات
أهم إرساتك عفر فيه إرداي
سلام ما بمن العالم تركبوا تقاطلتي مدبات تلفزيون إرسات
بتسددنيون أب كل توكيناتي تقرقير زلو
بدقفتي قبرش براوي وجله هقدف كم استقاتلت حبير الله زخبركم ما بكل خرنعة عالم تركبوا تقاطلتي مدبر تلفزيون إرسات أدراشا غيرنا سلازلنا بزتري وزلهم فريكوينسي كترخبونا كم تخيلوا كان بس رقم الفتو ناتان زي شراويتن مدبر تلفزيون إريسات نخلو كفال حبرة سبنا بزحوق أف منقدي واناون مهارن استتعري حبرتان هزبي بمغرب كساع رهوان حارنتن هزبنا متيو ديمقراسياويتن قواماويتن هاجر اتمسرتكا قالسنا أحيلنا بزي أب سكرين ستتغسى أدراشا فنونا بزبلتان بزحيلن منقدي يفنو كم زلو كنحبراكم الفتو مدبر تلفزيون ERISAT.
Hello everyone, I'm Tawalda Stefanos and this is ERISAT's The Power of One program. Today is May 15th, 2024. I have a special guest today. He is an author who prefers to be anonymous, so we're not going to show his picture. But he wrote an 80-page booklet titled The Snake's Nest, and it's authored by Tsilal, obviously a pen name. And this is what the book looks like. So The Snake's Nest by Tsilal. So Tsilal, welcome to the program and thank you for coming. To get us started, why did you choose The Snake's Nest as the title for the book? Maybe we can get started with that.
Well, thank you for having me. That's a very, very important question. It actually, the question came after I encountered this young Eritrean in my flight. And there was this thing that he was saying, you can't be at home all the time. There's no place that you can say home. We're always running. And if you are living in a snake nest, you cannot scooch an inch without being bit. So he was saying, when you say home, it has to be a place where you can be safe. It has to be a place where you can move around, do whatever you want without being affected. And that's your safety. And then if you're living in a snake nest, you would say you can't scooch an inch without being bit by a venomous snake. So what he says is the country has tentacles of suffocating leadership that is affecting its people and children on a run. And that's what he calls the snake's nest, because many things that you don't want to do can get you killed. Many things that you don't agree can get you jailed. And there is no home that you would consider a snake nest other than his country. And that's where he was running away from his own home. And we got inspired from that, language of conversation that we had with this youth at that time.
Right. So basically, Eritrea is the snake's nest, bottom line, yeah?
Definitely.
Right. So the subtitle of the book is also Eritrea, a one-man show, a country in ruins, and a factory of 21st century of unschooled children, suggesting that education is a concern you want to talk about. So tell us more about that. What do you want your readers to know about the state of education in Eritrea?
So wherever you go, wherever you do, in the history of mankind, there is no empire that has gone to the highest level without education or democracy. Education is the main thing. You can never proceed 1 inch, one line can never go to any highest level without education. And it means that this country has regressed. When my parents were telling me a long time ago, they were saying if you go to Ethiopia, at one point, and in Eritrea too, the most educated people used to be Eritreans. They were in college, they were teachers, they were professors, they were doing things that, many civilized Africans were doing, that can never be replicated anymore. The schools are limited. You don't see university level teaching. College are, maybe vocational stream, training. However, the mainstream training seems to be military, where people are enslaved in open space to go into this low-level training so that they will be easy to manipulate. And that's the reason why I feel like many Eritreans, even after they leave home, they struggle with life. They struggle with more, molding around and trying to assimilate in many places. And that does not seem to be the case in many countries in Africa who have, freedom of school, So education should not be taken away from any child at all.
Yeah.
And it's not derogatory at all. It does not really, it only shows the struggle and the suffering of young people. And the only way you can punish a child is by not giving them school.
Yeah, it's interesting because the only accredited university, Asmara University, was closed, in 2006, I think. So that's your point. So without revealing information that can potentially identify you personally, tell us about your educational background and if any of it was obtained in Eritrea.
This is a very interesting question. If I was trained in Eritrea at the time when I was a child, and I always believe I will be much better person now than what I am, because at the time when I was born, the education system and everything was much better. So obviously, I was not. But I think the education for the most part that I received, is more in Europe and the United States of America, and I'm more trained in researching, especially in the medical field, global health and things like that. I'm more interested now in what's going on with African health situation. That is how much I probably can tell you now.
Yeah, fair enough. So getting back to the contents of your book, you start the book with a flight from Ethiopia to Canada, where the conversation with your seatmate on the plane leads to prostitution and alcoholism in Addis. Was this just talk or a serious matter within the fabric of Eritrean communities living in Addis Ababa? What do you think?
So, as a person who knows remotely that country, your memories are, the humble society, the religious people, the cultural people, the giving people. Those are the memories that you always carry in your heart and that you always learn it from your family and the people that are around you. The amount of, desperation that I saw in Eritreans, among Eritreans in Ethiopia, was out of this world. Many people were at the mercy of their diaspora families. They don't go to school in Ethiopia. There's so much uncertainty over there. But not many people also don't have the luxury of, getting money from diaspora families, and some have seen things that I was not expected to see. Even those that have money, it seems to be alcoholism seems to be very rampant among these children. It made me feel like I was seeing children that were just living one day at a time, and the sense of hope was taken away from them. So then it was just this family member took me to this area where there were few Eritreans, especially females, living in a neighborhood where they were forced to sell themselves. This conversation shouldn't really take away anything from Eritreans, because prostitution, as you know, is the oldest professional occupation in the world. However, it is a measure of the desperation of these people. These people never chose to be like that. They never chose to go that route. They were just forced. The people that I know are never like this, and I think the country has decimated the culture and religion and the fabric of that society by forcing out children that at the age of minors, quite early, and just go somewhere but they will never be safe. And the desperation is only what we need to say, and it does not really tell the character of the people in general. It shows the product of the system. But as far as the conversation with that guy, I have to tell you, this boy was the most interesting boy and quite humbling. Despite going through all this ordeal, he managed to settle himself in Toronto. He has better living. He has shown time after time that redemption is possible, that you can live a better life so long you're given the opportunity. And that was the most interesting thing. And why we cannot give all this opportunity to all these people, it always speaks about the cycle of violence that starts from home. The more you're abused, the more you can feel that it's a normal thing to do to other people. And this cycle of violence, cycle of, I would say, out of character things can only be stopped if you stop the roots of the main cause, And that is the conversation that I started. And I didn't really mention anything about those young girls, but he was very humble enough to tell me about his friends and people that he knew in Toronto, where they were really involved in alcoholism and so many other things that he didn't like. And he actually claims that he separated himself from them so that he won't be in that circle, which is very interesting, conversation.
So you also expressed disappointment that Eritrea has wasted, big economic opportunities, especially when it comes to its long Red Sea coastline. And overall, you claim that it has not struck the right balance between the price and rewards of freedom. Say more on this. Which way do you think is the balance tilting regarding the price and rewards of freedom?
You say it's a very, very interesting question. Number one, a country that fought for half a century for a freedom did not even get 7 years of peace. It has to go to war for another. That cost more than 100,000, people in the first Eritrea war. Number two, right after the independence, the whole conversation was the hope that many Eritreans had. It was a time when people were glorifying every struggle and sacrifice that they had. And then the conversation was Eritrea would be like Singapore. It would be like Japan. It would be, and it came with a whole understanding. If people can fight for their freedom that much, then they can do whatever it takes by the book to have an economic upper hand. And that never happened. Half a century of struggle, so many thousands of children and young blood sacrificed was for slavery. And time after time, as you can see, this country's expectation was so much lowered. The reward is not even out there. You can never even mention anything like a reward for this country. Why would you sacrifice so much for this? It's an open house prison. However, Red Sea is a very key thing. You live as a country, being a neighbor to the fastest growing economy, Kenya, Ethiopia, Sudan, 2 ports. Why trying to find a common ground? It's just like sometimes if there is a woman that is full-term pregnant, she would never start a knife fight because her belly is sticking out. They can reach her, she may not reach them. Why would you sacrifice this much children if you cannot get an economic upper hand? If you cannot live peacefully among other people's, among other neighbors? Many countries are trying their best to reach out, putting all their tentacles everywhere to make the economy grow. You can see China, how it's spreading its tentacle. You can see the Russians, how they're spreading. They even use dirty soldiers such as Wagner's to do all these things, up to, so many things, up to so many dirty things for their economic upper hand. They make their countries grow in many ways. But Eritrea has a potential. Brave people that struggle. So many children that were hungry to see the reward, and yet their dream was killed instantly. It became an iron grip. And the way to create submission is by not educating, by making them, by lowering their standard. That includes education. So Eritrea cannot be a segregated nation and have all this potential at the same time. With the globalizations and all the things that you see, EU is creating some kind of, a battleground by creating a common finance and everything. There is a BRIC out there doing it. In East Africa, by just creating harmonies, you can increase your potential. But the most important thing is that country robbed the future of its youth. Because children education is an investment to the future. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Even if you have an economic upper hand, you have to create an educated peoples. And that is what is the missed opportunity, that the bloodshedding actually creates some resentment and division among people in other countries. And that resentment that you see is creating this vicious cycle of war again and again and again. And there is no way to bury the hatchet and move on.
Just to drill down on that point a bit, you mentioned Ethiopia and Sudan. Basically, the whole area is blowing up. On the other side, maybe this is the hopeful side, and I would like to get your perspective on it. The people who have made Eritrea the snake's nest are aging, and it may take another 10 years, whatever. Hopefully not, but there is going to be a generational shift. And relatively speaking, I think Eritrea within that whole region is, in my opinion, maybe daydreaming, one of the easiest countries to really bring back to normal. So do you see that Eritrea can actually come to the economic vibrancy and the education of its citizens in a big way? Do you see that as a potential? Of course, potential is nothing until it's realized, but
I think you can say, we can never say never. You can never say anything that was never. There's always hope.
Yeah.
You are at the mercy of its own people, culture, and religion, the fabric, the moral value, and social obligations. This is what's really holding the country right now. If you go to Azamara, you won't see anybody who misses the Sunday prayer. This is what is holding the country. As far as the elderly peoples, they have left behind a big scar, and there is a gaping hole that you need to overcome. To make a big hop and jump over it, it's going to be a big thing. What is so detrimental in the country, however, is the society that can represent the young people that can really, really take over those things are not being educated. So the diaspora need to fill in this gap, because they live in a free country, they live in a free world, they have seen what democracy is, and that is what is needed. The diaspora unifying tone, education, inspiring, and more than anything else, tolerance. Because if you don't believe the strength is the source of your strength is differences, then you will believe always that difference is not worth killing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that is the whole thing. I think the diaspora should have some kind of ground within that country, and it's not by becoming populist. It's not by using curse words. It's not by insulting people. It's not by becoming racist or regionalist, It is by showing it. And the other thing is also trying to create some kind of economic bridge within that country. Try to change the people in your country. If you have a better life here, then you have to have some family that have a better life there.
Right.
Those kind of divisions. But as you can see, there's not even a good internet service for you to understand certain things in Eritrea. So that is the big part. But I don't believe you have to wait for these aging, leaders to go away to preach these things. I think the dissidents and activists and everything, they need to learn to find common ground.
Yeah. I think, like I said, tolerance is the key. When you are tolerant, you entertain different ideas, and you become a beneficiary of those different ideas because everybody can learn, cross-learn from the different ideas. Unfortunately, that lack of tolerance for ideas is what has locked Eritrea to what it is today. I mean, like you said earlier, the Red Sea, I don't know, I think 10% of the maritime global trade goes through the Red Sea. And Eritrea gets $0 and 0 cents out of it almost. So those are the lost opportunities that can really come back if the tolerance culture can be developed. So you also talk about Eritrea's isolation from global realities and the widening political polarization and divergent views among Eritreans, which I think you touched on a minute ago. You attribute some of these to generational gaps, to gender inequalities, and to differences of values between veterans of the armed struggle and the Sawa generation. Give us some examples how serious this problem is.
This is actually very, very interesting. And you can sit among mothers and elderlies, and you will find certain elderly not sympathizing sometimes about certain things that you see. One of the most interesting conversations that we had was about children that drowned, in these things.
Yeah.
They would say they could have stayed at home. There was no reason why they should leave their country. So we can start from civilian first. Those civilians are still, stuck in that time of, nostalgic time of the glorification of fight for independence and all those things. That is what was holding the entire country at that time. And that does not seem to be the case anymore. They're not the one who are being chased now. They're not the one who are being asked to go to Sawa. They're not the one who, they can live freely and they can just do whatever they want. And they think that is the free country for the young people. And that is very, very interesting. But the second part is the gap that you see between the young and the veteran soldiers. The whole idea, these young children that go to Sawa, treating them as if they're like little brats that do not like to work hard because they requested to go to school, to a better school. They ask freedom. This is brat. We used to do this. We used to go through this mountain. This country has to move on from that cycle of violence. We have to see the future of a country, not the past of the country. So you can't be nostalgic about the whole, glory of war and all these things. Having said that, even the young children that you see now, you cannot call them millennials. They're really, really barely millennials because they don't really have that savvy computer knowledge, that savvy education. They even compare them to the other African countries, So they're just totally victims of the whole system, but they're still hungry for freedom. They're still very hungry. So the whole globalization that you see, I don't know if you ever Googled the most educated migrants in the United States or any Western countries. They're not really Indian Chinese anymore. They're sub-Saharan Africans. In fact, the most educated people in the whole Western countries are now Nigerians, South Africans, and many other sub-Saharans. If you go farther and see who are the most doctors in the United States, you would see Ghana, Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Sudan. The fastest growing middle class in the Western world now are actually sub-Saharan Africans. What really shows you is the potential of Africans in any world. Whether they stay in the Western nation, whether they go back to their own country, that shows the potential of Africans. It's not a content that you can just say ignore with all these resources and stuff like that. It is actually going to be the future attraction of the Western world. And that is what the country is missing with the globalization, segregating the whole country and treating it as if it's a North Korea, even not allowing them to have internet, computer, TV, and all those things. You're lowering the standard to the lowest of the low.
Yeah.
And that's what really detrimental more than anything else.
Right. The unfortunate thing is, the fiber optics that carry the massive internet data actually go through the Red Sea, right?
Absolutely.
By Massawa, and we're not even tapping into that. A couple of observations from what you just said. I mean, the nostalgia part. I think the freedom of independence was fought so that the problems that that generation faced will never be faced by future generations. Future generations will have their own problems, but we shouldn't take them back to solve the same problems that were solved in. I don't know about the extent of African, educated sub-Saharan Africans had to the extent that he mentioned, but it's not surprising because even if you take the Eritrean diaspora, people who migrated to Uganda, Rwanda relatively do a lot better than their peers in Eritrea. So it's the opportunity that's missing in these African countries.
If you looked at the percentage, actually, the education level they used when they studied it, bachelor degree, master's, PhD, and MD, when they looked at all, 44% and 66% in some countries. You see, if you see an immigrant in South Africa, about 60% of all the immigrants have this kind of, wherever they go, they have a job. When they have a job, their families have a better life. Their children have a better future. That sense of, Africa is going to take over the world by a storm. I can tell you that. It is happening already. It's not really if, it's just when. It's when. It's just the biggest problem with Africa. It's just we are good at killing each other. That's the biggest problem. But the success of Africans is very interesting. How they are the fastest growing middle class in the whole African nations. It's not just, even if they're not educated, you don't see an African begging on the street. They're either in the parking or in some kind of grocery store and everything. That is really, really interesting. It shows the power and the will to go
So
and move.
let me get this straight. So sorry to stop you. When you say the biggest middle class, you're talking about outside of Africa or within Africa?
No, here in the United States and many Muslim countries.
Okay. So no, okay.
They're the fastest growing middle class.
Well, and by extension, because those people are moving out of wherever they came from African countries, those African countries are basically getting denied the growth that the migrant Africans are having in the US, right? We also talk about the problems Eritrean youth are facing today, starting from Sawa and overall lack of opportunities in Eritrea, eventually leading to migration. What are the difficulties Eritreans face on their way, not on the destinations, but on their way to African countries, Israel and Europe?
It was my disappointment in 2014 that they were auctioning sub-Saharan Africans, and it was in 2014. It was the way to express how the North Africans look down. I wouldn't say all, but those traffickers and everything. So that was one of the thing that was hard to watch, and it was all over, CNN and BBC. It was something that that happened for 5 minutes, and all the people that were lined up, they were just auctioned in a blink of an eye. So that was things, but it only tells the trend. And when Africans are not respected in their own country, how they get treated in other countries, especially the North Africans. So that is the way to show that. However, there is no country that has, there is no other country other than Eritrean youth that has so many human rights violation reports. That shows how the North African did with the Egypt. So many things happened. The Bedouins, they're really written in Human Rights Watch. It's not like it's just so concerning. But what really shows you is they were abused and humiliated to the bone in their own country. And as they ran away from that, a worse thing is waiting for them. And it is devastating. The ransom thing they do, the torturing to get the ransom, raping women, and after even getting the ransom, selling them again to another person. And these are all reported in many, many studies, which I have cited them in the book. Where it really, really shows you, it explains that snake's nest, you run away from your home because it's infested with snake, but you go to another snake's nest, and Eritreans have been, Eritrea has been one of the countries that has reported the highest child, underage immigrants, and you can imagine to be barely in your puberty and go through all these things. And what kind of life would he have? And it's not a country that has therapy. You don't really find psychologists, talking about this. These are just people thrown out out there, even if they come to the best place in the world. That level of trauma cannot really be forgotten. And that is where it comes, to the whole alcoholism and drug. And I think I was talking to a friend of mine in Silverstone, Maryland, and there's a place called PG County there. And the jail system over there had some Eritreans over there, and their citation was DUI, alcohol, drug, and stuff like that. And I think these things don't come from a country that has a moral standard, religion. You have to go to the final part of the book as to how I mentioned that grandmother prays for everyone, what she was doing and everything, what the fabric of the old, culture looks like. And that doesn't matter after you go through all this trauma. You really, really think the normal thing is the same thing that you've watched to live. And this is a very, very interesting thing. And whoever is in the leadership, whoever cares for Eritrea or any other nation in Africa, not being able to understand this much suffering is out of this world. In fact, the one that hit me the most is when I saw this grave here, mark that says in Israel, unnamed infiltrator. They wouldn't mention his country. He's just one cockroach that just infiltrates that country. And that really, really bugged me, the word I don't like. It's just, for me, it's worse than the N word. But they never used it until the Eritreans started to migrate. They never used the word infiltrate until Sudanese started to migrate. And I'm not really, really surprised, because if these people do not get that much respect, in their own country, what do you expect from other countries? They've just been thrown away as if they don't, they're not human beings. So this level of trauma, without any kind of treatment, without any kind of psychological treatment, is really, really hard to endure. And I suspect many people will numb up themselves through drinking and other stuff.
I just want to clarify one thing you mentioned. I think in Israel, you mentioned what, a grave marker?
There was a grave of a dead Eritrean and they didn't know his name, and it says unnamed infiltrator.
That's what it said on the grave marker?
On the grave marker, unnamed. That really affected me, because it's just to call an infiltrator after even after you die, that name follows you. Unnamed.
Do you have a picture or something, that
I can search it. It was actually widely seen on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I can send it to you. Let me try to find it.
Yeah.
But to start with, an infiltrator is a name that I think is worse than the N-word. The definition is there, by the way, what it means, how it came, how it was assimilated into their constitutions, why they use it, but they usually particularly use it for Sudanese and Eritreans. And they also use it for election. Every time you curse an infiltrator, if you're the right-wing, leader, you can always win. And that was really interesting. But the point I'm trying to make is, once you die, it's just a peaceful time for you, but your name will be tarnished, like that, even in your graveyard, So I didn't like that. The bottom line is, you can't earn respect in an area that you don't know, or don't expect that if you don't give that much respect in your own country.
One of the things that you mentioned in the book, Tsilal, is you're opposed to England's deportation plans of Eritrean migrants in UK to Rwanda. But, reports also indicate Eritreans who migrate to Rwanda independently of this, of where they came from, are doing well in Rwanda, is something that you hear about often. So in light of this, why are you opposed to the deal UK and Rwanda are jointly working on? So, explain.
It's actually much more than that.
I know. Yeah.
And I was, when I was trying to explain that, I tried to explain the story of the Prime Minister himself, how he is an African himself. He was, even though he's an Indian heritage, but he was born in African. The first secretary was also African, both of them. So, and I had to mention how the Indians were deported from Uganda at that time to give the whole things. So it has nothing to do with Rwanda's hospitality and its capacity. Even though I do not believe for a single second that Rwanda benefits from this too, but it may benefit. I don't know. The EUs have been paying to Morocco to prevent Sudanese from migrating there. And in fact, about 1,000 people died when they tried to prevent that. The whole idea is, during this war time, the United States accepted about 200,000 Ukrainians when they did not really ask at all to migrate. The UK accepted 170,000 Ukrainians at that time. These people didn't have to go through the sea. They didn't have to drown. They didn't have to survive, the North African savages. They was just, taken there by a bus through Poland. Even though what they're going through is the most horrible things, they're not better than Eritreans. That's the word that I'm trying to say. Would they deport Ukrainian to any other country? In Rwanda, there are also Afghanistans. There are also Syrians. This thing, can happen to anybody. If they do better in Rwanda, it only tells them their potential, but it doesn't take away the fact that they were discriminated.
Yeah.
It doesn't change the fact that is the whole scenario. And I'm telling you, when these deals are made, it gave an idea to many people, to many countries. Now I think Belgium or Denmark, one of them, is trying to deport Syrians now. France is considering the same thing. You also don't understand and predict what can happen in Africa, down the road. I don't know if I shared this video. There was this guy who was airing about Eritreans in Uganda, where the price of the houses and the leasing and everything became expensive since they came, because if they find that something, they have a diaspora family, they pay it right away. It shows you how successful they are at the end of the day. It's showing some resentment in some people. So I think it goes to the root of hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Double standard.
Yeah.
And that is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. No. I understand where you are coming from. I just want to make sure that, we talk about that. So,
if I can interrupt for a second, having said that, if an Eritrean has to be schooled better, I don't believe first thing, second, they get schooled better in Rwanda than in UK.
You express your concerns about the traumatic experiences Eritreans are facing in their host countries, Israel specifically, like you mentioned. And then some of the things that you mentioned are PTSD, gender-based violence, and the economic difficulties in the host countries. Is there, where are Eritrean migrants mostly better off? They've been to Israel, through different African countries, to Europe, to Canada, to US, even Australia, as far away as Australia. Do you have any indication where Eritreans are living more or less stably, relatively speaking?
I would say, I can't really tell you this, but I would say the Eritreans may have struggled to assimilate, in many, no matter where they go. And that also, how much school you had before you come. The amount of ambition may not be as, as high it used to be. And besides, with the ongoing trauma and all these things, it may not be as, as I think time is the only thing that can heal this kind of wound. Having said that, I would say the people who are in the United States are much better. Not because the Eritreans are different here. I think there is more economic opportunity here than, I don't know if you see all Africans, they do have their own nursing home health and everything. And I've seen a lot of Eritreans that did very well in this country. Toronto, I've seen many Eritreans. They have a stable life. There is safety, but the economic adventure is not as good as what it is. But then, in areas such as the UK, surprisingly, there are more reports of violence over there. And I do not know why. Either maybe it's being told more than other countries. But I think some of the femicides, and also killing each other and fighting and brawling and all these things were reported more from England, even though we heard about, some happened in Australia and here and there. And then the worst thing that happened in Israel, during that movement when we saw the activists were, coming around. But the bottom line is, I think the difference is more to do with the host country's economic adventure and civilization than Eritrea itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's all boiled down to opportunities, and the US being the biggest economy in the world, I don't know, 20-something trillion dollars GDP. So obviously, it's not surprising.
And stringent law here.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's not surprising that, that's the case. So, and finally, Tsilal, you also express your disappointment with the lack of unifying tone among dissidents, as you call them. What do you think is missing to make things better?
This is actually very, very interesting and quite fascinating. You will see activists, even on some kind of TV forum talking to each other. And all they say sometimes is, I am not a supporter of Tigdif. I'm the opposition. But then sometimes you don't see sense of direction. The sense of direction is the most important thing. You cannot really undo anything that has happened right now. You can never live the past if you want to, move forward. But you should not fail to understand that the biggest missing thing is that differences are normal. Do not use those to curse people. In fact, what is so annoying is the cursing part. Like they insult each other so much, and that shows you some kind of, some movements could be populist movement without really foundation. They really, really need to come around certain important people. And I don't know how those important people are trying to reach out to these people. You have to say to everybody, it is okay to say this. It is normal to not agree, but you will always remember, remind him that he is your brother, that she is your sister. And that is the main thing. You can never say things because you don't like them. You also need to really tag it with some adventure to show passion for other things. What is very important, there's the same thing. 99% among us is common value. Our difference is 1% in general. If you really, really narrow it down, the difference is 1%. What makes a 1% difference look 99% is ego. So you can swallow ego and look at the bigger picture and look at finding a way to work with other peoples. That's what it is. You have to hold on to that small, tiny little bitty goodness in everybody's heart. If you can hold on to that, it always gives you a room to work on that.
Yeah.
There is always a room to work on a difference. If you don't believe in those things, then that's good. But in general, as far as going forward and finding a transition to any other, better government is, you cannot just stay as a diaspora. You have to have a tentacle within you, the country itself. You have to find a way to reach to the youth over there. You have to find a way to reach the leaders over there. Do not believe in certain, and then do not preach violence. Whoever thinks a war was won or lost has never seen a war itself, doesn't understand a war itself, or is somebody who glorifies from war itself. Otherwise, the biggest winner, no matter what, is destruction. And this country cannot afford any more destruction. You have to find and hold on to that tiny goodness in anybody's heart. Plus, if you can't unify among themselves, do not believe you can really hitchhike on a neighboring nation or any other political opportunities on any other country to help you out, because no matter what, everybody has an ulterior motive. This temporary allegiance, what they call temporary allegiance. I'm going to be with you because you're enemy of my enemy. Without basic foundation, always comes back after the enemy is gone, that you're going to go back for each other's throat. And that is happening in East Africa as long as I can remember. So Eritreans need to learn school education, democracy, but respect. And it's quite embarrassing to see in that small, tiny nation, people talking about Hamas and Sarai in this desperate time. And some of them claim they're political leaders and political opposition and this and that. That is actually a country in disarray, worse than and that's what the government would do. The government would say, well, the alternative is that one. At least I don't talk about regionalism in here. At least I unify the country. At least I protect you from other people, even though you can create an enemy that doesn't exist and make a soldier to control the people. So they need to be very careful. And not just that, they need to be very careful who they trust. Who they trust. Because it's just temporary allegiance without moral, social obligations, values, common values. And look at an economic upper hand. If it was up to me, the whole East Africa should create some kind of, economic network. Just leave aside everything. Create an economic network, freedom, tax exemption, exchanges. We cannot talk about Medeber all the time. They were just airing this video about how Medeber looks nice, It's not really, really what this country needs right now. An expectation.
Yeah. Very, very good and strong words of wisdom, Tsilal. There's nothing to add to that. I hope people will pay attention to the great conclusion that you left us with. Tsilal, I just want to thank you for sharing your insights with us today. I appreciate it. Please come back when you write more books.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. You've been really wonderful.